Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another episode of the strategy series. You know, we just came off a weekend where Gotenks just absolutely asserted its dominance in 3 different tournaments on release weekend. So I figured it was time to do an episode of the strategy series where we talk about how to counter Green Gotenks. So if you guys are new here, definitely subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss an episode of the strategy series. If you want to help the channel out, there are tons of links down in the description to do so. With that being said, we will get started. So Gotenks, before we talk about how to counter it, we got to talk just a little bit about what it does. And to be honest, Gotenks does a little bit of everything. What I mean by that is it's kind of like a mid-range control deck. It does both things very well, but it also puts on a lot of good early pressure. So the leader in and of itself is green. That tells you it kind of leans a little bit towards hand control, but it's not totally like this hand control beast that we saw with like Dredge Goku or Clash Goku, right? It's a little bit less than the hand control. The battle cards in the deck don't quite do as much hand control. You can play some number of rebrand Punishing Passion, and you certainly can build the deck to lean more towards hand control, like my teammate Russell Seltzer did. I do have his deck profile on the channel from earlier this week if you want to check it out. But there are some builds of Gotenks that kind of just focus on doing everything, being like a Swiss Army knife type of deck. So like I said, you had that good early pressure with Gotenks Grim Reaper of Justice. Also, this card provides a lot of draw power, provides removal, which is quite strong. And then just to top it all off, you have that little bit of control / ability to stall the game out with a card like Dormant Potential Unleash, which is basically Green's upgraded Nimbus. Doesn't stop the initial attack that you use it on, but it says to your opponent, you have this attack that I'm using this effect on, and one more attack for the turn. It's got a very strong unison, an SS3 Vegito. Basically, when that thing gets some 7, basically gets a look at your life and make you pitch 3 cards from your hand. It's pretty nuts that way. So the deck just does a lot of everything. It's not perfect by any means. You know, when you're this type of deck that can do everything well, yeah, there's decks that outclass this in aggro. Yeah, there's decks that outclass this in hand control. But when you're able to do everything quite well and your deck is ultra consistent, which Gotenks is very, very consistent, you're going to have a very, very strong deck. But it was so dominant over the weekend that I do want to talk about some ways to counter it. So we'll get started. So right off the bat, Max Power Kamehameha is a great removal option that just about any deck in the game can side deck and even possibly main deck. It's a great main deck card because the removal is not always the relevant thing about it. So if you're playing it in a matchup main decked where it's not particularly great for its removal, it's always a negate attack and you always get to add it back as long as you have those 4 cards in your drop to warp. Comes back to your hand, and then at any point in the game, if it's valid for its removal effect, you can do that. And to be honest, a lot of the really good decks, most decks in the game, to be honest, they do cheat things out for cheaper energy, whether it's EX evolving, whether it's using Successor, any of those types of skills that just play battle cards that are greater than their current energy cost that they have in their back row. Max Power Kamehameha is going to be valid in most matchups. It's a very easy 2-of in the main deck, but if you're not going to main deck, very, very easy to side deck as well. It helps with Gotenks Grim Reaper of Justice. That's the #1 card that you're going to want to be sniping with this. Now, you have some more specific options, like in green, for example, you have your regular KO removal. In other colors, you have some removal as well, like black, you have warp removal. Blue, I don't love removal that bounces back to the opponent's hand because 1, you give them back their Grim Reaper to then play on you again, but 2, when Grim Reaper is removed from the field by his skill, your opponent gets to add back a Trunks and a Goten. So you're basically saying, here's your entire play back to your hand. Like next turn, sure, you can just like Grim Reaper me again. Now, there has been an argument made for Barrier of Hope where that removes multiple Grim Reapers. So if your opponent is swarming you with multiple Grim Reapers, yeah, I guess you could Barrier of Hope them. The draw 2 on it is also kind of nice. I still don't love it though. I'd rather play something in blue that bottom decks, which, you know, granted isn't all that popular. I wish there was a little bit more of that, but with some of the baby stuff in set 11, we got some more stuff that bottom decks things, particularly the Golden Avenger 5-drop baby counter. So when you're looking at removal, I like pretty much everything that doesn't bounce back to hand, but that's just my personal thing. Let me in the comments below if bouncing back to hand has been working pretty well for you. But next up, I do want to talk about a little bit more of a matchup specific thing. Sinchenron has the ability to negate Grim Reaper of Justice when it comes into play. Of course, they still got their enter play autos, so they can pop this in if they want to. Obviously, as a Sinchenron player, you will kind of benefit from that, drawing 2 and replaying your negative energy Dragon Ball, or they can KO something else on your board if they want to. And then they lose the dual attack for the turn, but they also lose the auto that says when it is removed from the field by a skill, they get to add back the Goten and the Trunks, right? So if they do swing with like their leader, or if they swing with the Grim Reaper of Justice, whenever the Grim Reaper is in rest mode, you can use Hey Shenron Venomous Mist on the same turn that it was negated by Sinchenron Destruction Incarnate, and you can remove the Grim Reaper of Justice from the field, and they will not be able to pick up the Gotens and the Trunkses. In certain scenarios, that can actually set the Gotenks opponent back quite a bit, and it is a play exclusive to Sinchenron, but I only mention this because Sinchenron is a deck that's actually really well positioned right now. Like, another great matchup where the 9-drop Sin kind of shines in is like Red Broly, for instance. Negating the swaps of any Red Broly's coming into play really slows that deck down a lot. It is very matchup specific. Unfortunately, you can't just like splash these cards into any yellow deck, but it is something I wanted to mention. It is a very strong interaction that Sin has going for it against Gotenks in particular. Next up, I want to talk about some of our Floodgate negates. I did mention earlier how Gotenks does have a pretty good time when it wants to be aggressive early, because Grim Reaper comes down for as little as 2 energy. It's a 25k deflect dual attacker. When you have your Floodgate negates like Sun Gohan Baby's Minion, like Topo Righteous Aid, if you're playing green yourself, you have Dormant Potential Unleashed, you have these cards that do help out when they're trying to be super aggressive. And luckily, you know, it's not like you're dealing with blue that has God Sealing Technique Trunks, which is like a straight answer to Topo Righteous Aid. Now, Gotenks does have answers to Topo that it will probably side deck. Normally, these decks don't main them. One of those cards being Dodoria Brimming with Power. That is basically a 1-drop that says if you have a green unison in play, negate the play of your opponent's battle card if it is 2 or less. So, in particular, that will stop Topo Righteous Aid. And I mean, this is just like a sad truth of Topo, unfortunately, is that as time goes on, there are more and more cards that answer Topo Righteous Aid. But Sun Gohan Baby's Minion is a little bit of a different category because it is a 3-drop. You know, if you're playing in a baby, it is a 2-drop, and then it is also valid to be hit by Dodoria Brimming with Power. But in any other blue deck you play Sun Gohan Baby's Minion in, like Soul Striker or SS3 Reboot, for instance, Sun Gohan Baby's Minion is not going to be hit by Dodoria. They have to be playing something like Preemptive Strike, which I haven't seen in any Gotenks main or side deck. You know, granted, I think it's a pretty valid card to side deck, but definitely not in the main deck. So Sun Gohan Baby's Minion is another one of those Floodgate cards that does help a bit against the Grim Reaper onslaught. You know, if you're in yellow, for instance, you have Flying Nimbus, but the more and more we look at like Flying Nimbus compared to Dormant Potential Unleashed, it just gets really outclassed because your opponent still has their unison that they can attack with. And some of these Gotenks decks are main decking the green Dark Broly unison. So if you're going to use Nimbus and, you know, only stop maybe 1 or 2 extra attacks that would have taken place that turn, I guess it's better to have it than to not have it, but that is something you do kind of, you know, just have to keep in mind. But in general, the Floodgate battle card negates that really tell your opponent, okay, if you attack me, you are getting heavily punished. Those are great. Heroic Prospect Trunks is another one, but I didn't want to quite mention it here because it's not very easily accessible at the moment. It is a very expensive promo right now, but if you do have access to it and you are playing blue, it's definitely a great card to use against the Grim Reaper onslaught. But anyways, that takes me to my next thing, which is Dark Broly Overwhelming Evil. I just got done talking about it a little bit, but if you are playing green, whether it's Judge Goku, whether it's Majin Vegeta, some other type of green deck, you can main deck or side deck Dark Broly Overwhelming Evil, because a lot of what Gotenks wants to do is keep the opponent's unison under control. Basically, you know, by doing that, by keeping their unisons off the field or at low enough markers, you're basically preventing your opponent from using their unison's ultimate abilities. You're also stopping them from using their free counterplays like Frieza Charismatic Villain, God Sealing Technique Trunks. But if you are playing green, you can side deck or main deck Dark Broly Overwhelming Evil. We actually saw a lot of Gotenks lists maining this card, and I didn't quite understand it at first because it isn't part of Gotenks' Awakening Condition to play a 3-drop unison. It's part of his Awakening Condition to play a 2-drop unison. So why main deck this card? That doesn't seem to quite synergize with your deck just as well. Well, the main thing was they expected a lot of Gotenks in the format, so playing a lot of mirror matches, it helps to have Dark Broly Overwhelming Evil in the main deck. And why does it help? Because of the auto. Once per turn, when a marker is removed from this card by a skill, your opponent chooses 1 card in their hand and discards it. So when you're playing like Majin Vegeta, for instance, you have ways to proc this on your own turn to trigger that effect, but it also gives you a nice amount of protection if you are against the Gotenks matchup, for instance, where they want to be removing your unison. You basically punish them for doing that. So that's really good there. Next up, I want to talk about just hyper aggressive strategies. Gotenks does have Dormant Potential Unleashed. That is a great card against certain aggressive strategies, more so like low to the ground, like AOD, where you can actually get value off of Dormant. But then you have decks like Dark Broly and Red Broly BR that hit really big really fast, and Dormant is just a little bit less effective. Yes, it tells you can only attack with X amount of battle cards per turn. That is quite good, but if you look at Red Broly, for instance, you can get some really big critical attacks in there with your 2 swings, and you know, Gotenks is not going to kill you super quickly unless you somehow like take a lot of your own life very fast. So if you can get into that, you know, turn 3 turn 4 range with a deck like Red Broly BR or Dark Broly that swings with a bunch of 30k battle cards, I think you're going to be in for a pretty good time. Even though they're going to be dormanting you maybe once, twice, 3 times that game, you can still get in there for big damage, which I think is quite good. And then next up, guys, I do want to talk about Red Gogeta. I did a video last week or maybe the week before talking about why Red Gogeta is not that great. I have some revisited hopes for this engine in different leaders, because we saw that Bulma topped with this engine main deck. I had that deck profile on the channel from earlier this week. Once again, check it out if you'd like to see what I'm talking about. But this is a engine that is not leader locked, and I think it actually has some potential with other red leaders in the game. Maybe Red Beerus leader, maybe Vegeta Baby Red. So this is an engine that particularly does well against Gotenks, because Green and Gotenks in particular is all about KO removal. This, you know, combo here cannot be removed by straight removal. Gotenks can kind of play around that by playing max power Kamehameha, but then you can kind of play around that yourself by playing strategies of Universe 7. So there is some back and forth there. It's kind of like who has the card and who doesn't. It gets a little bit risky there. But anyways, this is just a generally good engine against Gotenks. Is it good against most everything else? I don't know. Time will tell. We'll have to see. But I do think this is actually a really cool thing to explore with other non-Gogeta leaders, because I still think the Gogeta leaders themselves, just in the context of this format, are not all that great. But anyways, the final thing I want to talk about with you guys today, counters. If you're in yellow, if you're in blue, you have access to counters. Particularly, these are going to be great against Dormant Potential Unleashed. They're also going to be good against Frieza Charismatic Villain, which are the 2 main ways that Gotenks is interrupting you on your turn. So if you're in yellow, I definitely recommend splashing 1 to 2 Swift Retaliation Cooler. It's just an amazing card in just about any matchup. You know, stop that Final Negate and go in. And if you're playing blue nowadays, whether it's like the baby deck itself or just, you know, blue card deck, you're probably playing Baby Golden Avenger because it's just that good of a card. So guys, that's gonna wrap up today's strategy series episode. I want to know more ways in the comments below that you guys are combating Gotenks. Let's make this a community effort. Just drop it in the comments down below. We'll all help each other out. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.